Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of The Cup, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock. And today we'll be talking about the production of King Lear. Each episode we're going to break down a production we've all just recently watched. This week it's Stratford's production of King Lear, directed by Antoni Cimolino, starring Colm Feore. Today we are joined by Cup of Hemlock's resident dramaturg and literary manager Ryan Borochovitz. Yes, Ryan, show us your cup. What type of cup do you have today?
I have a green coffee mug with tea in it.
Beautiful, beautiful. We are joined by Edmund Clark, our
Hello,
production
everyone.
manager. What is in your cup today, good sir?
I have some water.
Beautiful, and also in a green cup.
Yep.
And we are joined by Jill, our King Lear virgin, as well as our special guest panelist of the day and friend of the company. Jill, what's in your cup?
I have this lovely I Love Manatee cup, and it has some birthday cake tea from David's Tea in it today.
Love it. And I am Mackenzie, the general assistant of Cup of Hemlock, and I am drinking from my lovely tanker, which is full of water. So, we'll kick things off today with a quite general question out to the group of, how many of us knew Lear before going into this production? I knew it. Ryan, you knew of it.
You mean new as in read it? Seen it?
Yeah, like have you read it before? Have you seen it before? Or was this like brand new? Didn't know what the heck that was going to happen? That you were surprised by the eye gouging scene, like all that good stuff. Like
Then I think just you and Ryan.
Yeah, I actually have never had the privilege of studying this in like a practical or academic sense. So I was a pure virgin watching this presentation of it. And Ed?
Fantastic.
Yeah, my only experience with Lear, I mean, I knew of its existence. I'd seen The Dresser with Anthony Hopkins and Ian McKellen, where Anthony Hopkins' character plays bits and pieces of Lear since he's an actor in the movie. And then also from adaptations when I was in university for theater school.
Fantastic. Ryan, so is this your first production you'd seen of it, or have you seen other ones before?
I feel like this was my first full stage production of it. I've seen full film versions of it. I've read the play several times before. I've seen season 3 of Slings and Arrows, which the incomparable William Hutt played the role beautifully. Yes. And actually, that's not true. I have seen a production. It was at the Fresh Meat Festival in Ottawa of Burger King Lear. And it was a puppet show with actual, like, real food playing the roles of all the characters. And it was probably the most remarkable piece of theater I've seen in my life. I don't remember the name of the lovely person who created it, but if you're watching, it was amazing. And keep making food puppetry work.
Fantastic. Well, I had read the play. I had seen clips of it. I actually used the Edmund's bastard speech for my entrance monologue into York. So I knew that speech really well. So then it came on, I was like, I know this. So there we go. We got a nice mixed panel of people who are brand new and people who have some base knowledge of this play. So I think the first question we always can start with the production is, which character do you think was best performed of the show? Like which person stood out to you in the cast? Because I mean, everybody can be great in the cast, but it's usually someone you either identify with or the performance just elevated just that much further than everybody else. Like, who was that? Jill, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay, great. I think there was a lot of standout moments by multiple actors throughout the show. One that really resonated with me, and it was just like, I don't know why it kind of resonated with me, but The Fool. And I went back and I actually watched the interview that was prefaced the showing. And Colm was saying how this actor, like he was such like an honest.
Stephen Olmert is his name.
He was very immediate and very vulnerable in the rehearsal process, and I really feel he was that on the stage too. And he, being a Lear virgin, he was kind of like a good guiding light for me too, or like something to lean on. There really wasn't a performance I disliked in this interpretation, but something, like The Fool, And any of the moments that were very raw and grotesque in like an emotional or physical way, I was very impressed by those.
Fantastic. Just wait till you see Stephen Ouimet take on a part in Coriolanus, which we'll be reviewing next. He plays one of the villainous characters of that play, so it'll be very interesting to see your interpretation of him when he's playing a very different role, because Stephen Ouimet does a very good job at playing very sincere characters. He was a fantastic Sir Andrew Aguecheek when he performed with Brian Bedford in Twelfth Night. So it's he's a fantastic actor. He also runs the Birmingham Conservatory at the festival, so he's quite a fantastic man. Well done. Great choice, Jill. Ed, what saith you? Who is your standout shout out of this production?
I'm gonna have to agree with Jillian. I think The Fool was my favorite performance, and I think it has to do maybe a bit opposite to what Jillian was saying. I think it has to do a lot with his tempered performance of the character. He was very well paced and well timed with when he chimes in, when he speaks, how he spoke amongst chaos. And I think it was that chaos that everybody else was setting against his performance that really made it stand out. So for me, The Fool for sure it was I mean, every moment that I feel you were supposed to laugh, you laughed, and every moment you were supposed to think that you thought.
Yes, they had great chemistry, Colm Feore and Stephen Ouimet. Like, you watch that scene with them where they're talking about, where Lear's saying, "Do not let me be the fool," after he's on his way from Goneril's to Regan's. And there's that moment on the side of the road where it's the whole idea of sell the coxcomb, and then he gets into the whole thing of where you see the sympathy of Lear.
Yeah.
And Stephen Ouimet plays such a sincere performance with that. Like, when you find out the fool dies and is hung at the end of the play, you're like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I
it
think
comes out of nowhere. Like, nobody expects him to die.
Yeah, I think the language especially really lends itself to those two characters when they're on the stage. They contrast, I mean, so well with one another, just like with Lear and Gloucester, former Earl.
Yeah.
And he also helps us tap into the empathy of Lear, I find, too, because they're in that moment that you were talking about, Ed, too, just the intimacy between the two on stage. He sort of acts as like a second reflection of Lear. I find actually like Lear was talking through him, or he was talking through Lear. So that relationship, I think, flushed out by both actors was fantastic.
I think he's the only character that really checks Lear. I mean, there are others that try to call him out on his actions, but it's the fool that's just like, oh, I'm the fool. That's like a constant with some of Shakespeare's other fools.
Absolutely.
Very at liberty to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the job of the fool in the medieval courts. Is they were the one person in the court who kind of called BS on the ruler because it was done in a very satirical way. And it's like many other fools we have, like either whether it's Feste with Olivia or what other good ones do we have, Ryan, that are in the Shakespeare canon that are the other great fools of Shakespeare?
Let's see. Well, Falstaff is obviously one we spoke at length in the past. Feste you mentioned. Trying to think now off the top on the spot here. Jacques from As You Like It.
Jacques, there's a great one. There's a lot of great fools that
there's
really
also just a lot that are just named clown in the script who don't really have as fleshed out roles but still serve that same function. Lancelot Gobbo and Merchant of Venice is another fun one, even if you can completely remove them from the play and nothing changes plot-wise.
Well, they're there to be the morality kind of compass of the show. For sure. Ryan, who is your standout character?
Well, like, standout is tough because obviously with any production of King Lear, you want to talk about the star, Lear, and Colm Feore did an excellent job, and I feel while I'm going to pick someone else as my standout, I don't want it to seem like, oh, well, let's talk about everyone but Lear. I'm sure you had more questions about his performance specifically, but Lear will always steal the show in any production. But I think
it's his show.
Yeah, I think for me, though, the real MVP of this production was probably Scott Wentworth as the elder Duke of Gloucester. Something that I really liked about his performance is I think there's a tendency to play that role as kind of like this like old dotard, bumbling fool, a bit of a Polonius type who really doesn't have it together, and that's why he misses the fact that one of his sons is conspiring against him. But I really admired the power that Wentworth brought to the role here.
Yes.
That he wasn't a fool. He was kind of following along and just was legitimately tricked because he's, I guess, a more clever adversary, and he never felt like weak or, well, he's obviously pitiful after his eyes are taken out and he's, you know, going over to the cliffs of Dover. But at the same time, I did like that strength that Wentworth brought to the role that I rarely see.
To add to that too, Ryan, and I feel like he did such a great job of exuding this throughout, but the production itself like was so raw and bare and so, like in your face almost, and that just like sparked the thought of mine of how wonderful all the other actors did with that too. Like it just seemed it was a very like grotesque raw production that stripped away, it made it kind of more human in a way, which I'm sure we'll get into production value wise, but that just triggered because I think he did a really good job of
to hop on to that with Gloucester, his voice was very
Scott Wentworth. He has a great distinctive voice.
I mean I do, for those who just know me as a production manager, I also do acting outside, but to have such a powerful voice on the stage, and like you had said, this bumbling dotard where he's just, you know, kind of oblivious to some things and whatnot, but like to have such a powerful voice associated with that or contrast against that is it's nice to see.
I think that's what anchored the performance for me, is that he didn't feel like that weak, bumbling fool. And just the voice alone did play such a big role in just conveying the strength and power of this figure who is no fool.
He had such a growth of like inclination of relationship with himself, I found too. He was probably one of the characters I found the most growth in as well. Even the relationship he created with his eye sockets, like you know, it started out as like a bloody rag across his eyes, and then you know, when that was stripped away, he just did a really good job of showing that.
I think what really sold his virility is that first monologue he has after Lear sends Cordelia in. It's before Edmund comes out with the letter speech, where he's talking about his two sons and just how like he's like, I slept around, I got like a bastard kid, and he has a lot of that strength, like even up to when he gets his eyes gouged out, when they drag him on stage to tie him in a chair. He's like he's fighting it, like he is all the way, like it's a very powerful presence on stage when he comes on. And you're right, Ed, it does definitely come from the voice in particular. That's what really sells Scott's performance for sure. Because he's fantastic. He actually just played Shylock recently as well. He was Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof that year. He was Shylock, and then he also was Juliet's dad. Capulet in R&J as well. So he's a fantastic actor. Tony nominated as well. So there you go, Scott Wentworth. I will say, definitely he's getting the win for this. I will say mine was Maeve Beattie as Goneril.
I love Maeve Beattie.
I loved her so much because she didn't play Goneril like a villain. Like I actually felt pity for Goneril, where I was like, girl, like I get where you're coming from with this. We're like where she was basically just frustrated with the situation that she was in. We're like, I think having now seen my parents go through this with their parents, where it's like where you get to that age where it's like you want to help your parents, but at the same time they're still wanting to be the parent. So there's that power struggle, and particularly Maeve Beattie, because she's the eldest. Now has a lot of expectations put on her, as Antoni Cimolino points out, where she is the representation of upholding the past with Lear, where it's like that thing of where she's trying to assume control of the situation, but he is continually fighting against it, and she just gets frustrated, and she's like, you know what, forget it. Like, you tell me that, like, I should be a barren like person who shouldn't have a child, and you're beating my people. Like, she was very sincere in her performance, that even when she like makes the choice to join up with Edmund, you can see why, because it's, for her, it's not a love match, it's a power match, where she is more like, okay, my next step of securing myself is get with the new Earl of Gloucester, because clearly he's got more sense about him than Albany does.
Mm-hmm.
So like she gave a very well-rounded performance that I felt really kind of sold the character in a way for me, because the two sisters, Goneril and Regan, can be played as very Machiavellian, like evil, abusive people, but it's like, no, I actually understood where they were coming from. So May Beatty, you get a shout out from me.
I'm gonna contend with you on that one, because I'm not doubting the sincerity of the performance, and maybe I missed a beat or two that helped me get into the transition of what I'm about to say, because I believe that at the end I was a bit thrown aback, where there was this sort of kind of vindictive nature about, you know, what she was doing. And I mean, you know, poisoning her sister and whatnot, I feel like that just kind of might have to come out. But it did throw me off a bit, where it's like, okay, maybe in the transition, something to me was missing, or maybe I just missed it, whether it be through movement or something, or I'm not sure. But there was a bit of an abrupt switch towards the latter scenes of Lear. Am I the only one that just saw that?
No, I kind of agree with you, Ed, and I think it has to say to Lisa Rappeau-Martel, who played Regan. I do agree. I feel like their relationship sort of tapered near the end for me. Like in a way, like obviously it does, but in a way that it could have been stronger. Not necessarily from an acting sense, just from like a vibe sense. And that could have just been a direction thing, or who knows. But because I was able to find the contrast and comparisons between those two sisters, especially throughout the whole show. But I just felt more of a closure with Regan than I did with Goneril, which I don't think necessarily is wrong. But I agree with you in saying that there's maybe something that was missing there.
And I always appreciate going for the not the obvious, right? So they didn't go for the Machiavellian, vindictive, you know, conniving in the very beginning all the way to the end. But it is, you know, something very difficult to do when, you know, the obvious is the obvious for the reason it's the easiest, right? So when you go against it, it is kind of hard. I just think, it kind of tapers in little moments.
Ryan, what do you think?
I was pretty happy with the sisters' portrayal. I see both sides of this. That yes, I do think that this, you know, going against the obvious, as you put it, Ed, that really did cement their kind of take as these sort of villainous characters. Something that I kind of just love about this play in general, and maybe this production brought it out a little more than others, is that the thing that starts the conflict is kind of so small in a way that it's just Lear shows up and he's like, I want all my knights to live in your castle. And she's like, no, this is too many knights, get them out of here. And everything kind of spirals from there. Obviously it starts beforehand when he divides the kingdom, perhaps in the not best allocation of resources, but things don't actually start going downhill until he's just like, look, I have all my knights, and she's like, don't bring those knights in here. And
which I don't blame her for. Like they make very valid arguments in that scene between the three of them, where it's like, why do you need 200 like knights and squires when like I have a whole household who can look after you?
See something.
Like, he's like, it's not. There's no matter. Like it's just like I want it. And it's like, well, he doesn't care if you want it or not. You're not in charge anymore. They're the ones that they're in charge now.
See, something that I remember arguing with my grade 12 English teacher about this is that why I'm like, he's the king. Why is this a conflict? Why can't he just say, no, I'm staying? And he's like, well, and the English teacher's like, well, because he gave up the land and it belongs to Goneril now. Like, but he comes with a whole army of knights. He can take the land back if he finds that she's not using it to his cup of tea.
Yeah.
He could. Well, that's a Shakespeare plot hole.
I don't think it's a plot hole. I just
raise your cups every time we hear
17-year-old me was not impressed at Lear's judgment there.
Before we segue too much away from the lovely ladies of the piece, might I put a compliment on the costuming of the women? I loved, right from the get-go, Goneril's all in green, Regan's all in red, and then Cordelia sort of has a mishmash of
muted yellow kind of,
and a blue and whatever. And so right from the start, that sort of gives you a connotation as to what their vibes are going to be. Like Regan to me was very fiery and almost vulture-esque throughout the whole piece, and I feel like that was a really good choice to put her all in red. Goneril, a little bit more conniving, green, like jealousy, and
more mature,
exactly, earthy, right? Like she's the eldest, and then it was so lovely I was intrigued. I was like, ooh, I wonder what Cordelia's going to look like near the end, like what her costume's going to be. And it was like all, like navy regal blue, and then just like a sleeve of the cream that she had from the beginning.
If you notice on her costume piece, it's flowers, right? And that in the scene where Lear is in the forest, or when he's outside and he has the flower crown,
right,
has this kind of like a fawn, right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, or there's just that little bit of connection between the two.
The minute he came out with the crown too, I immediately thought of Cordelia as well, right? And that unity, even of his daughters too, like the cyclical unity.
Another cool thing, because I was gonna mention the costumes, I thought they were amazing, but the two sisters, their costumes are very reminiscent of the Cinderella sisters.
I was just about to say that. The ugly stepsisters. Yeah.
That was like one of the first things I saw, and I thought, "Oh, that's like." Because I thought they were going to be vindictive when they came out. I thought that's just what I thought was going to happen.
Right,
and then going off of what Mac was saying, how they didn't Goneril didn't the actress who played Goneril didn't really went against that. I was like, whoa, okay, that's.
It's also neat to know with the costumes that Cordelia, the youngest, is Lear's favorite, and she has the most intricate design out of all three. So it automatically sets her apart from the other two who are in solid one color. So right away you're like, costuming wise, you've already told me that they are different statuses. Where clearly Cordelia is the one that gets Daddy's special gifts, while the other two are like, I guess I'm just getting my red dress or my green dress.
Yeah.
So,
they still had some nice ruffs, though. They had interesting accessories. It wasn't just a plain green dress.
Their armor, one might say.
Very much so. Very much so. But there we go. So even in a production that has a fantastic cast like this, there's always a character that we may feel was either underrepresented or just didn't hit the right note. Maybe they went in a way that you didn't particularly agree with. So, Ed, why don't we start with you this time? Who was a character that you feel didn't quite hit the mark? Not saying they did a terrible job, but maybe their interpretation wasn't just what you were thinking for the role.
At first, I was going to say Edgar, but I mean, and I do have my qualms with how that was interpreted. But I would say first and foremost Cordelia.
Sarah Farber's Cordelia.
Yeah, I thought, because, and this is my first time watching Lear and seeing it, but as I was watching it, and once I got to the end, it came to me that the beauty and the magnificence of Cordelia and her purity comes from others' descriptions of her, right? Because she's not that prominent throughout the entire play.
She leaves. She's gone for a good chunk of it.
It's just like Antonio with Merchant of Venice. It's like through people's description do we get a sense of this character. Well, while being on the stage in the first scene, because that's really where you said it, her character just wasn't strong as the language really suggested that she should be. I mean, she knows that she's going to say, what she's going to say is going to be something that her father will not approve of, right? She knows this, but she says it regardless. So I think the character was just really portrayed as a lot more weak and very emotional, and I mean, there was like, and when I mean grace, I mean like when the regal aspect of it, right? Like the grace of Cordelia in her as being like a princess, just wasn't. For me, I thought it was a bit lacking in that regard.
Fair enough.
So that's my because I just think, and this plays into, you know, the end especially, because I don't think Lear should be the one, you know, to be sort of sad about it. I think it's Cordelia, right? The one who was just kind of given the short end of the stick for what Ryan eloquently put as a very trivial matter.
It's very true.
That's me.
Sarah Farb as Cordelia. Fair enough. I have to agree. I think of all the characters, she's a bit more of a wallflower in this show, where I didn't fully connect with her. So when she leaves, it's like, oh, that's too bad. But I know she's coming back at the end. So, but even then, with the how at the end, just because you really need to connect with Cordelia off the top in that first scene, because to get that emotional impact of the howl and her death at the end, you really need to feel for Cordelia. I don't think there was enough. Mind you, we're watching a film version, so the camera was showing us what we want they needed to show. So I don't know if there were things that were that were either looks or moves that were done off camera that maybe would have accented her more in that first scene. But I have to agree that which wasn't as pronounced as she could have been.
I will say, Mac, even if she wasn't necessarily as pronounced and we didn't necessarily feel for her on her own terms, Colm sold the hell out of the howl.
Absolutely.
So did you guys treat yourself to the interview before the performance started? Did you watch it?
You have to, with him and Antoni Cimolino.
So it was, I mean, I was already like heartbroken watching that, but he had shared that his best friend or one of his good friends had died that day, and so like that howl was for him. And you know, most of us are actors ourselves too, and like the open vowel sound, right, is such like an emotional access anyways. And I instantly got goosebumps and started tearing up, because you knew that it was like, this is a different howl, like this one's real, like this is not just you as Lear doing it. And so I love that he shared that in the interview too, because I think that's especially, I mean, again, we're probably going to delve farther into Lear as the convo goes on.
We will.
With someone like Lear and personal access and what, you know, that takes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jill, how about you? Was there any particular character that you felt was either like didn't quite hit the mark for you?
I kind of wanted more, and maybe this is just not even an acting sense, but a character-wise, I wanted more from Edmund.
Me too. That was one of my notes as well.
Because he was killing it for me at the top, and then Mike Scherer, who played Cornwall, just like stole that scene, and like he had so much agency, and blood was boiling that I'm like, and like he's the villain. Like the idea of villainy was tossed around throughout the whole play, I would say, but and maybe that's because that makes Edmund's a little bit more tailored. But I don't know. He was just like obviously essential to the plot, but not I wanted more from the character.
He was very neutral and very conservative in his performance when you can go bigger.
I kind of thought he like was doing an interesting job for most of the time, and I thought especially the way that they've changed the character of Edgar made him more of like a bit of a lech, a drunkard at the beginning, not the noble son. But the moment where Edmund kind of lost me was near the very end, To Both These Sisters, How I Swore My Love speech. He played it way too much for comedy for my taste, whereas I think that could actually be like a very, this guy's creepy, gross, the way he's way into political alliances and sexual alliances. So I thought that was trying too hard to be funny and kind of lost the villainy of the part.
Yes, absolutely.
I do believe that Edmund should have been I think it's something easy to get into where you go for the more rageful, but like you said, the Duke of Cornwall, is it Duke or Earl?
Earl?
Cornwall.
Cornwall,
Yeah,
yeah.
Cornwall,
Yeah. That he did steal that from him, and that I think what would have been an interesting approach is if he had gone for a more, I guess, Machiavellian approach, or just more subdued. I think if it had been well contrasted in that sense, because it's something to like. One note that we got in acting school, is what's the opposite of love and hate, right? Or love, people would say hate, but it's indifference, right? So he has this hate for his father, and everything else is he's very much detached, like most of some of the behaviors in the play.
It even made it a little bit difficult to latch on to his relationships with Goneril and Regan too. Like, it wasn't this. I don't know if it's like a stink thing for me. I just was like, when they shared intimacy, there was a neutrality to it.
Yeah,
I think, and I don't. This it kind of plays into the, how do I say I guess I'll just say the pace of the show, because it's ups and downs, the roller coaster ride that it takes us on. Some scenes do take away from others.
Yeah.
But get into that more.
Yeah, I can say from you, like on piggybacking on Edmund, is just when you watch him, I didn't feel the danger. Like, yes, he does dangerous things in the plot, like betray his dad, but like he could have gone more subtle, like almost gone like Alan Rickman, where like Alan Rickman, who was very monotone in all his performances, like he still had that menacing threat to him, where like it could have been perfectly, Jill, as you said, like against Mike Shira's Cornwall. But yeah, it just felt very neutral. Like it kind of felt like Edmund's it's considered one of the great Shakespearean villains, like in Iago.
I would say, Mac, sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
I would say, just as I was kind of commenting earlier, that they've made Edgar a bit of a kind of sleazier, grosser character who needs this redemption. I would say that maybe the fact that Edmund has here been subdued and less overtly villainous may be kind of a similar choice along the same lines that you were describing with Goneril and Regan, as maybe he has more justifiable reasons. The fact that he is considered a bastard, and as a result he has no social station, and due to something that's no choice of his own that his father laughs at because of. So I think there's reason to think that we're going for a more sympathetic portrayal of Edmund here. But then you can't really have your cake and eat it too and still have him be the grand villain at the end.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
I just think,
Brian, you put it perfectly.
I just think that he has if it is going for a more sympathetic approach, he just has too many tantrum moments that kind of takes that away from me. And if that were to be, the case that that's something that they would want to keep, I think an interesting approach to it would be sort of him representing a brat, like a child,
right?
While everyone else is more calm, but you don't really get that level of maturity from a lot of the characters, where they're more subdued. A lot of the characters become very rageful throughout the performances that kind of match Lear's rage, and that for me kind of, I don't think anyone should get even as close to Lear when he's at the storm, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of storm, that's a beautiful segue to, I was obsessed with the soundscape of this production.
Mine too.
And the lighting, like especially from us watching it like a movie, right? And I'm sure we'll delve into this as well too, but how we have tailored depictions of the piece because we're looking through the lens of the camera as opposed to sitting in the real audience. But it was that soundscape and the lights that just like picked up as transitions really picked up the piece. So when something like this, there's a neutral moment or something that you kind of sat funky or wanted more flushed out, you could always lean back on the production characteristics of the show for sure.
Yes.
Something I would even add to that, Jill, is the storm is obviously the centerpiece of this play and huge light and sound moment, but something that caught my attention about the lighting design and shout out to Michael Walton, who did the design. Excellent job.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in the earlier scenes before the storm comes, that there's this interesting like periphery of shadows around all the main action that the characters just disappear into, and every exit is just being swallowed by shadows, which I thought was marvelous atmosphere created by.
For sure, and then especially because it was such a scaled set, like the set was so scaled in this piece. The lights and sound took place a physical set, which was really cool in a modern sense too.
Yes, and I mean, like, the sound design is just fantastic. Like, even in the eye gouging scene, the sound the sound they figured out making for the eye popping in the socket.
Like a jelliness to it too.
I was watching a Saw movie or something. Like, I got really, really grossed out by that scene in all the right ways, but I was just like, wow, this is, again, the rawness of it, right? It was like, this is it. Like, we're showing the degradation of all these characters. You're seeing it. Not sheltering anything.
It was definitely, for me, the sound design that was my favorite element of the production. The moments where Lear is going mad, or where he shows his madness, and you hear I was trying to figure out what the sound was, but then once the storm came, I realized that the sort of windful noise in the background, when you start to hear Lear kind of, I thought, oh wow, that's marvelous, right? Because that sort of little calm before the storm, and it's just slowly rising.
The building sound. It's that
little
between each of the scenes, there's that storm getting bigger and bigger, which we'll get into more when we get into our themes and motifs. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but during the Cordelia and Lear reunion scene at the beginning, there was like a little bit of musical underscore to really kind of pull at your heartstrings, to make you really feel that reunion, where it was string instruments, like it was almost like a plucking of a string instrument in the background. I was like, even now you're trying to pull my heartstrings and manipulate me with music. Well done, sound. Well done, Antoni Cimolino. So, which we'll segue right into our next sequence, which production element we think maybe wasn't our favorite part. For me, it was the set. Because the set, because it was so minimal, like at times when you were trying to differentiate between, are they outside or the inside, like in the three-way scene between Regan, Goneril, and Lear, it's like, are you guys supposed to be standing outside the castle, or are you guys supposed to be standing inside the castle? Like at least in the first scene, like there was like chairs and candles, where I was like, okay, you're clearly inside a hall, but then the lights didn't reflect that enough of where are you at a lot of the time.
And subtly, like the nods to, it was funny in the scene with Gloucester and Edgar, when they were walking up the hill, they were just like walking in circles, but then they were making it obvious that they're like, look at us, it's so uphill, blah, blah. Like that was funny to me. And to me, like, that's a really smart way to use the set. But again, without them nodding to their location or what they're doing, it was a little bit.
That moment actually doesn't take place on the top of a high cliff, even like textually. Edgar is playing a joke on him to kind of bring him. So like, I think it always kind of has to be staged that way to show that maybe the actor playing Edgar could have done more like wink to the audience about, so we don't feel like because it is theater and there is that theater magic element of course.
I would have played with that little step that they had in the background instead of walking on the one surface. Just play with that extra level that they had.
That's true.
It could be a comedic moment where he goes, I think this is even ground, and he goes, just pulls him onto the second step.
But again, a nod to the lights, like the gobos and the lights were just stunning. Like I was like, I'm in a forest. This is a storm. This is a castle. Like, so took place of it. But I will agree with Mac in just by sheer lack of set. That was probably my only negative comment into my least favorite production.
Yeah, like some set pieces work, like the first scene with Edgar, Edmund and Gloucester, where like it's really just a desk and a chair and a lantern. It's like that totally worked because it set the mood right away of where we are, and the lights were darker, so it's a little more of an eerie situation. But then like other moments where it's like, like, are we outside like Goneril and Regan's castle, or are we inside? Like, where are we in this situation? So I think if they had done a little bit more there, because I mean, like the nice thing is they have that set, like the festival set allows you to bring stuff on, and I couldn't tell if they had the upper balcony available to add another dimensional layer to the top part. I couldn't I couldn't get a clear view if they had that available to them.
I think if you have lack of set too in any production, it's sort of abnormal to see lack of set in a theater, right? So if you have that, you need the set pieces you do have or lack thereof. There needs to be an intimate relationship with that set piece or with a movement sequence or whatnot. So something that just comes to mind is Mirvish's staging of Hamilton, which I'm assuming is quite like all the other staging of Hamilton, but they're always interacting with their like the minimalist set, right? And like it's a very intimate relationship, and so the fact that it kind of goes in and out with this production in that respect, that was just another factor that kind of took me out every once in a while. Yeah.
Ed, how about you? Is there a particular piece of production that you would say didn't quite hit its mark for you?
Yeah, I would say that the production elements were all really good, like great. There was one of my favorite parts of as a whole, one of my favorite parts of the production. But I personally prefer, whenever Shakespeare is performed, I personally prefer a space and players. So I love the set. I thought the set was awesome. Where it's just them and their description or whatever's behind them or around them. Now, what I thought was the weakest, and it's not that weak when I say this because I think it's still great. What I think was the weakest was the lighting, and the reason being is because and when we get into themes, the biggest theme of Lear is the storm and this oncoming storm. And I like the color choices that they had, but I think the placement of some of the light or some of the colors was maybe put it a different arrangement. So instead of having it where they have that sort of morning orange in the beginning,
right? Yes,
I would have cut that out. I would have had it where they have that very sort of bleak color throughout, where you see most of the people on, and then in moments where Lear is starting to show hints of madness, where the sound plays in the background, the lights also dim that blue from the storms, right, very slowly, and then after the storm, because we have that wonderful moment with Lear and Gloucester when they come to the realization. Right after Gloucester goes blind, after Lear kind of succumbs to his madness, and he's like, "Oh, it's like we had to go through all this just to realize this." Right? That should probably be the only moment where there's a breath of fresh air, where things clear up, right? And I think that because it comes after the storm, I think that would just contrast so beautifully with one another, where you see the madness, but the thing to take away from, for an audience to take away from, is that scene with Lear and Gloucester, not the scene, because they like that is sort of the highlight when it comes to the lighting, is the storm, because that one is just so distinguished from the rest. I think if it had the sort of morning fresh air atmosphere that it has in the beginning and in the forest scenes when they're outside, right after the storm, and in that moment with Gloucester and Lear, I think we would have known what to take away from, right? That this is the morning after, and then bleak.
Exactly. Ryan, what about you?
I don't know. I was kind of overall quite impressed with the production elements. I was sort of hard pressed to think of, like, I've already said, I quite enjoyed the lights, the sound. I even thought the minimal set worked and they used it well. I thought the spatial relations were good. One thing, I feel like this is more of a directorial than like a strictly production thing, but I'll say it anyway. Yeah. And I say it's more directorial because I don't really think it's the actor's fault for the thing I'm taking issue with here, but it's the Kent Oswald relationship. I want to talk about that a bit.
All right, let's talk about it. Let's get into it. It's a perfect time.
So much like how I think as I commented on a few times earlier, like the the Edgar Edmund relationship is sort of flipped from the traditional way, and like the Goneril and Regan are maybe made more sympathetic than usual. I feel like Kent, who is usually this like moral center of the play, this upstanding, loyal to the king man, I think, and I feel like this was a deliberate choice as I'm watching it. It feels like he was trying to be framed as in the wrong most of the time.
Okay.
And like the actor Jonathan Goad, who played him,
Yes.
like he had like a real interesting cowboy kind of like demeanor that I've never seen taken to the character before. But
yeah.
But I found this got frankly a little uncomfortable in like his scenes with Oswald, and because Oswald is supposed to be like this real sniffling, cowardice, but also like partly evil, like minion who you're not supposed to like. You're supposed to just like hate him the second you see him. But the actor whose name escapes me at the moment.
I got it. Mike Newton Thomas. I cannot pronounce his last name.
Okay, well, him. Our apologies if you're watching. But yeah, like he did like nothing wrong in his performance. He just played the role like. But I didn't hate him at all. And in his, there's like that moment early on where like Kent like beats him down and like yells at him and berates him. And I'm sorry if this is going to get a little political for a moment, but the fact that an actor of color is cast in this role, and then not saying, oh, they should have made him awful, because obviously, but it just felt very uncomfortable that I feel like we're supposed to root for the white man who's beating him for no reason.
Yeah, no, very true. Very true. Like, if anything, no, go ahead, go. Yeah.
Well, I just saw it as if we're looking at themes of Lear. I saw this production just give us what is sort of inherent, and that the addition was that scene, or that relationship where I think it's a commentary on racism. If I'm being blunt,
I feel like it's supposed to be, but I don't know what it's trying to comment, if that's the case.
It feels out of place.
It's the wrong character to do it with.
Exactly.
You could probably do something a lot more interesting with like a black Edgar and a white Edmund, maybe, and like or whereas versa, like or vice versa. I think Oswald is kind of there's not enough to him even on the page that he can be used as that symbol for that. And if you, especially with Kent and Edgar as our two heroic characters, are the ones who beat him and then kill him in Edgar's case. I think that unnerved by this.
I think that because in the entire script, or maybe they cut it out, but I think that is the only character that is referred to as a slave.
Yeah, many times, which
many
is
times. And if I'm to guess what the intention was like it is this sort of, I guess, kind of allegory towards prejudice and whatnot, and to show that this is wrong. But it like you said, the scene just doesn't. Those two characters, those scenes just I don't find they lend themselves to that. So I felt that it was out of place.
And this was the first time
I kind of take you out of Lear, the play. Entirety, the composition.
This was the first time that I've seen anything Lear related where I did not like Kent as a person, and I think, and I don't think that's Jonathan Goad's fault in like the portrayal. I just think there is something weird, and I think the dynamic with Oswald had a lot to do with that.
I think that's definitely a directorial sort of note.
I'll piggyback on that. Like, I found Kent to not be over, like, he's almost an enabler to Lear's bad behavior. Because like Lear, I can't remember the exact sequence of that scene, but does Lear hit him first, Oswald, and then Kent picks that up, or is it the other way around where Kent starts and Lear kind of joins in with him? I
think Lear kind of shoos him away, maybe, and then Kent really goes for the.
So like, that's something I didn't like, especially watching it like my second time, because I watched this 3 times, but like watching it the second time where I focused on him some more. I was like, Kent is not great in this situation. Like, he is enabling Lear's bad behavior.
Yeah, and like that's an interpretation, certainly like that directorially and actingly they can make, but if you lose what I think is the moral center of the play, and that is usually Kent, you kind of have Oswald certainly doesn't replace that role. Like, if that's the commentary you're trying to make, so like we lose something important, I think.
Well, Kent has that great line, which is like the "be better, Lear." Like after he's kind of chastised Cordelia and it's kind of turned her out, and Kent is really trying to get through, and then he has his whole disguised character where it's like, where is this person? It's almost like he's two different people. Where I didn't see the former Kent at the first scene later on, so I actually had to go back and make sure it wasn't like a double cast.
Yeah, like he had the long wig on in that first scene, so when he comes back in disguise, that's all that's missing.
It confused me a bit.
Yeah.
But especially since we commented earlier that there might have been something a little lacking in the portrayal of Cordelia. Those two characters are really the ones that you need to get down pat, and that's why Kent is the one that comes to Cordelia's defense at the beginning, because we are right and Lear's in the wrong is like the big neon sign that hangs above both of them. And if something's a little lacking with both of them, we can't ask Colm to pick up the slack for everyone.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true, for sure. Jill, any comments on Kent and Oswald and all that good stuff?
Just agreeing with that, and also not reading or seeing this production before, I kind of just glazed over those characters as like, oh, these characters aren't the most important plot points, so I'm just kind of gonna just be entertained, but not fully focused on their relationship. But I feel like it could have definitely been deeper or different.
Well said. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so overall, do we think this production hit the mark? Will we recommend it to other non-Shakespearean people, Shakespearean people? Like, is this a version of Lear we would want to recommend to our friends and other peoples?
I would definitely say yes. I think even from an actor's point of view, or having actors watch this production, because similar to going back to talking about the minimalist set, and it's not that I didn't like it, it's just the relationship with it was a little bit wonky here and there for me. But going back to what Ed was saying, I think that's so important to kind of just, when you strip everything away, like it's, again, I've used this word countless amount of times, but it's the rawness, real, like earthy vibe to it that I think a lot of actors will benefit watching, especially sort of just in that alone modernizes Shakespeare in a way too, which I think is important. And just to kind of like piggyback on that, I love the level of staging, the levels that the staging took. So like at the top of the show, there was more standing, and even utilizing that back level, like that was used a lot. And then as the play went on, things literally stepped forward or down. So like characters started sitting on the ground, or like only using the main stage as opposed to the levels. And then you literally got that Gloucester and King Lear on sitting in the floor like children almost, or or like the connections of people to strengthened as the piece went on too, in an intimacy or a physicality point of view. And then even with the sisters, right, like they stand regal at the top of the stage, upstage, and then as they move downstage, literally they're sitting on the step and like lean. So I just feel like it's a really good depiction of utilizing levels in a piece, which I think is important too. So
it never felt static.
So that was really brilliant how they used, and even like Edmund dies like splayed like at the bottom of the stage too, right? So there's that whole so definitely from like an actor point of view, see this piece. And I even think from like a layman's point of view too, or someone who's not familiar with Shakespeare, there's enough moments and pieces in this that just showcase the trials and tribulations of humanity that I think will hit home with a lot of people, regardless of what your background is, and the intimacy and the emotion that is exuded, especially by Colm, but the whole cast itself. And that there's sparks too, like Maeve whipping around and like shooting a line as opposed to just like saying it. There's different there's ebbs and flows in the piece too that I think everyone can get a little tidbit of something from.
Fantastic. Ed, anything you'd like to piggyback on? Is this production you'll recommend to your other Shakespearean friends to watch?
Definitely. I think it is worth watching. The reason why I think it is worth watching, and if the mark is to tell the story of Lear, I think it has been told. But I do believe that there was more that could have been extracted from the play. Like I said, I think, like I said earlier, I think this production just plays with the, inherent themes of betrayal and that chaos, the authority, and I think the things that are kind of given, they run with that. But I do think it is something for people who aren't familiar with Shakespeare, right? I mean, I was able to follow along with it. My experience with Shakespeare productions outside of a school setting have just been it can be very difficult to follow along. So the actors did an amazing job in interpreting the lines and guiding us along the story that is unfolding, even if you miss certain nuances, right? Even if you miss certain nuances, like you still understand what's happening. You still understand the general moods of each scene and where one is leading to the next. So I think it is worth watching. It is digestible, and that it does tell the story of Lear.
Fantastic. Ryan, how about you? Is this one as a TA you would show to your students?
I think this is actually the ideal type of production I would show the students. Sadly, this only has 3 weeks on YouTube before they take it away, and we're already well into week 2. I don't know when it'll even be when this goes live that we're recording right now, but
you can watch it on iTunes. You can also rent it from there, as well as Broadway HD has a copy of it, so it is available on other platforms.
But I think this is kind of the ideal type of production, if not this production specifically, but this production falls into this type of production, obviously. Mac, I was saying this to you before we started recording, but I'm a real sucker for just like a straightforward, faithful, fancy dress, non-wonky type of production of any kind of Shakespeare play. Like I'm sure I'm going to enjoy Lepage's Coriolanus next week because I like wonky too, and I like Lepage's scenography. But at the same time, I don't think there's anything that can really compare to just, yes, this is the play. We have respect for it. We don't think we can outsmart it by doing something bold and just presenting it as it is. And while I may have been hard on some specific elements of the production earlier in our discussion, I think overall it was a great success. The acting was fantastic. Designs were all great, and I felt things for the characters that I've seen many times before. So I think that kind of says it all.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so now I did some reading and watched all the extra videos that Antoni Cimolino and the festival put out. So some of the themes and things that they were really trying to highlight was, for example, homelessness and poverty. Do we feel they hit that mark? Because we see that at the very beginning, there's kind of those pauperish people on stage before they get shooed away. And we also see like Edgar in his moment where he becomes poor Tom, where he's kind of taken in by the other impoverished people. We see that with Lear and the whole idea of him being turned out into the storm.
Can I start this one?
Yes, please.
I'd love to start this one because I have thoughts on this.
You can lead the way on this particular
topic. I totally get where they're going with that, but I don't think it succeeded, and I think it fundamentally could not succeed, and I think that's for one simple reason, that these people are all super rich.
I was just about to say that.
This is royalty. Like, even if, they spend a night out in the storm and night pretending to be poor Tom, like, they're going to return to their castles. And maybe Lear doesn't because he dies shortly after. But, like, I don't feel like this play can be a meditation on what homelessness really means in the very pragmatic sense of there are people without home. Because Lear has a home, he just can't put his 1,000 nights in it. Like,
it's true. Like it's true.
And I almost like Edgar's Tarzan look. Like I didn't see him as being like a caveman. I was like, oh, like he didn't, because of his status. I couldn't see him as you could put his layers and layers of dirt on him, but I would never not see him as royalty or regal. So I agree with you in that, Ryan.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, Colm Feore did it. He talks about it in his pre-show interview where he talks about how reading George Orwell and just trying to study that aspect of it. But Ron, you're absolutely right. We're like, they're rich people who ultimately kind of get.
They're the richest of the rich.
I was actually.
No, go ahead. Ed.
I was actually a bit more put off because of those homeless motifs that they had in there. I mean, I'd never seen the play, but I knew that the beginning scene where you first see the homeless gentleman and then you see him at the very end, I knew that was kind of, for the life of me, I thought, what? I think he was like the Undertaker. I thought he was somebody that was supposed to, like, he was symbolizing, someone's going to die at the end, and I'm coming to collect the body. That's
Which kind of does happen stagingly, because that homeless figure does show up at the end to put his hand on Edgar, but he's not there to like bring the deceased Lear and Cordelia to the next fight. He's there to kind of, and I don't even know what to make of that final gesture where he puts his hand on Edgar's shoulder, because so Edgar is he says the final line of the play. He's presumably going to be the next king of this land, and the way I would like to charitably read that gesture of the homeless gentleman putting his hand on his shoulder is, you may be king now, but we are the same. But there's not, as I just got done saying. So,
or like, the fate's in your hands now, what are you going to do about it? But again, that would have to be pushed out more throughout the whole.
You would have to write dialogue for these homeless characters, I think, to actually communicate that, and don't try to outright Shakespeare.
I agree with you, Ryan. I don't think this was the production to have that. Would you say that the Tempest, you could do that with like Caliban?
Yeah,
no?
I think. Yeah. Well, because Caliban is already the character that represents that, like, he is the spirit of the island, who's literally an indigenous population whose home is taken from him by the colonizing wizard who shows up.
Well, there you go.
We'll get into the Tempest. We'll save the Tempest. We'll save our Tempest talk. But I mean, I think if you want to look at another thing about homelessness, you look at Timon of Athens,
which we will also talk about.
We will, which we'll get to, but that's also very much a companion piece, because it's both about two old men who end up in the wilderness together. But yeah, I mean, another thing Cimolino brought up is that he wanted to represent the daughters as the eldest, who is Goneril, representing the past, the middle daughter, Regan, representing the present, and the youngest, Cordelia, representing the future to Lear. Do we think that came across in the show, that these three daughters represent these three different time periods for Lear?
Can I start?
Yes, Jill. You are more than welcome to start.
So I think one of the three succeeded fully.
One?
And I think, again, Lisa Rappeau Martel as Regan in the present. I think she was always grounded, like feisty from she never wavered, she was like, anytime she was on stage, and I didn't, then the next I would say would be Maeve Beattie as Goneril. Which she just, Maeve has the beauty of holding sort of like a stoic vibe about herself anyways, and her being the eldest, like that, she portrays that beautifully, don't get me wrong, but in contrast to Regan, I felt like that could have been more discovered rather, and then with I did not feel at all with Cordelia being the future. And again, I think it's that initial introduction of Cordelia and the fact that she sort of disobeys what her father wants to hear. That's where you can sort of go on her path of representing like future or different than the now and the tradition. But it didn't spark for me. So that whole fire wasn't lit for me.
No, very, very true. Ryan and Ed, do you have some piggyback?
So I kind of do and don't agree, I guess. Well, on one hand, it's much like the homelessness idea we were just talking about. I feel like this is maybe trying to graft something onto the play that's not really there.
Right.
Because to me, like, all of them are Lear's juniors, because obviously he sired them.
Right.
So to try to say that any one of them is like the past in relation to, like, no, they're all in their own way, just, I think, different trajectories of what the future could be, or the present future could be. I think Cordelia feels like the obvious one that should be the future, but the fact that she dies very unceremoniously, the future still goes on without her. So, like, I think Edgar is, of all the characters, the one who represents the future, because he is the youngest surviving character and the one who's the presumed next in line for the throne.
Right.
But yeah, like Goneril and Regan, to me, by no fault of anyone, they just felt like they were very temporally speaking, to use this metaphor, on very similar footing.
Yeah.
I just feel like it was an interesting idea that I don't know what could have been done to manifest it.
Right. For sure. Ed, what about you?
So the intent was to have each daughter represent those segments of time in reference to Lear, correct?
Right. Yes. Yes, that's what Cimolino talked about.
Yeah, I don't think it hit the mark at all, really. I think, yeah, like Ryan was saying, I agree. You know, the obvious is Cordelia, but I think the best thing they could represent, and like any child does represent, is legacy, and how that legacy was just sort of snuffed out by the person leading it.
Lear destroys his own legacy.
Yeah, so it's it didn't quite hit the mark for me. I think it would have been, like I said, if Cordelia was a stronger character in the beginning, you saw the promise of a kingdom in her.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Lear's favorite daughter. I mean, you could stage it, and I think it would be really interesting if she was staged as center, and then Lear was put to the side, right? And then you could probably get that sense, a clearer sense of future, with Cordelia. But with the other daughters, since they're all kind of pining for the future, they're all wanting the kingdom. It just didn't. It didn't hit the mark for me.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Are there any other themes or motifs that we want to discuss? I mean, obviously we've talked about how the weather kind of builds throughout the first part of the show, leading up to the tempest that we see at the start of, I guess, after their intermission, because they put their intermission right before the storm. But yeah, we saw that build.
The storm.
Exactly. We had that. I mean, and we saw them kind of exploring the idea of the defiant children becoming the good leader, where like you have Edgar at the top as kind of the drunken, womanizing man, who then also becomes implied the next in line for the throne. Cordelia becomes Queen of France after being defiant to her father and just kind of making a way in the world without him. So I think that's an interesting theme they brought up.
I think something to unpack too, while we're on the topic of themes and motifs and stuff. Again, I actually wrote down verbatim the quote shared the interview with Colm and Antoni, like the whole idea of this production, and arguably the play, I guess, too, is experiencing true love. And Antoni was saying it's about the journey to try to understand what love is and experience true love in our lives. And then Colm immediately responded with, and of course, not understanding how it's done until it's too late. And it was just, I get what they were saying, but that wasn't fleshed out for me in the production. Like it definitely underbellied a lot of moments and characters, but and I think it's beautiful how they both phrased their whole purpose or backing behind the production. But I didn't see this being a play that discovers that or unpacks that, and maybe that's exactly the point. But
well, if we're looking at what the actual love in question is, I think we're supposed to think it's the love between Lear and Cordelia, but that existed prior to the events of the play. A bit of a stumble during the entire plot, and then is recaptured at the end, but oh no, it's too late. So like, it's again just another case of, I think we're trying to graft ideas that this play isn't the best suited for onto this play.
Every relationship is so political in this piece, I find. Like, it's never based on love and intimacy, and even when it is, it's very crass and in your face. You know, it's like, that's not a tender kiss, or that's not like a loving exchange. It's all business, right? And so it just kind of puts a little sour taste in my mouth too, because if it's about experiencing true love, that to me, the idea of that wasn't present at all in the piece.
It makes sense to me now why they had so many kissing, so many kisses in the play, in the production. That, I mean, I was just kind of off put by the kissing. Not that I hate kissing, But it's my favorite pastime. It was just a bit sort of out of place for me. I don't think it was. I think if the kisses were to be done, it would have been. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't. True Love. I didn't see it all that. I didn't see that as the driving force behind. I don't. Even if I were to read it, I don't think I would feel that could be a driving force behind King Lear the play.
I guess there's one glimpse of a little sprinkling of true love, or maybe it's just my opinion of it. But I wrote in my notes, the King of France is a boss. He takes Cordelia for who she actually is. In one moment he does that, and quite possibly never again.
Yeah, we don't see him at all in the rest of the play, even when we're in.
Yeah. So the tiniest little sprinkle. But there was a moment of like, oh, whoa, these people are like, he's actually seeing her potentially for what she's worth. Yeah. Maybe it's false or not. But that was like the only time in the play where I was kind of able to meditate on something like that, where someone's actually seeing someone or trying to get to know the true person behind the mask.
Yeah. And I would like to add just that Carl Ang, who played the role of the King of France, he's in one scene, but he owned it, and like he leads.
Oh my God! I was like the King of France. Yeah.
Yes. I like that he didn't try to play it with like an air of Francophilia in a way.
Yeah.
He's like, yep, I'm the King of France. Deal with it. Yeah. He came in. He was happy to, he scolded Burgundy, who was like a sniveling.
Who was beautifully dressed in burgundy.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So now we head into some of our specials as King Lear specific questions, where we will kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive into the play itself. So production wise, it was fantastic. We can infer some things from the production in our answers to these questions. But the first one, which I think people always ask, is what do we think King Lear's mental state is? I have a very different interpretation of it, so I will leave that to the end. But I want to hear some of yours first. Ryan, why don't we start with you as our resident TA?
Well, I will say one that I am no expert in like degenerative mental illnesses, so
nor am I.
I don't claim any authority on that matter. Also, I am not really a psychoanalytic critic here, so I don't want to say
what?
that. Oh,
God darn it, Ryan, you're out. We're shutting you off.
Like I think. And obviously in Shakespeare's time, they didn't have a very kind of comprehensive grasp on the type of mental illnesses that we can now read on it. So if
everything's a madness, a fever.
Well, madness, fever, an imbalance of the humors that just, cut some blood marks on yourself and that'll cure it all. So clearly the medical science wasn't there, but what may have been there, like if there was any inspiration of that in the writing of this text, I think it's just from observation of seeing these kind of figures, whether they're men in power like Lear or just any man, succumbing to these, illnesses also. I think on one of the talks earlier, they mentioned that Colm's a little young to be playing this role, but they also added that Richard Burbage who played the role originally at the Globe back in Shakespeare's time, was 40-ish when he played it. Yeah. So, and I think that actually, probably considering what life expectancies were at that time,
that was old.
Yeah.
Most people weren't living long enough to experience the types of degenerative mental illnesses that we now know will come with much greater age. So maybe Lear actually was more of what we would consider a young man, but in that time, he's definitely. I would actually love, this is kind of just like been a personal thing of mine, nobody steal this, you can if you want, I'm sure someone's done it already, but I would love to do a version of this play as director where Lear is like in his 40s and all the daughters and like Edmund and Edgar are all played by literal children. No, but like it seems comical, but it actually is probably more accurate to the way these characters would have been, and it would very much hammer home the idea of the future versus the past in a way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but Jill wants to.
I think it definitely gave an interesting point of view. Jill, what sayeth you?
Just saying, I think Colm did a really good job. I have a psych minor, but I'm no expert of like that kind of things either, but I also have lost 3 of my 4 grandparents, and 2 of them sort of went down similar to how I saw Lear projected on stage. So I think he did a really good job of adding a ton of color to Lear's mental state, because it's almost like he mixed like somewhat of like a bipolar-esque way with dementia, you know, and it made it so there were so many more layers to go into, because like his state of mind initially is his state of mind, but then you add the age on top of it. You know, he's suffering in more ways than one kind of thing. And I just props to Colm for acting the crap out of that, because and he did a like the physicality he put into, you know, the mind is one thing and the way he delivers verbally is one thing, but I think the true winner here is the physicality he put into himself, to showcase that and to show the difference between, are you having a blackout, or are your, you know, synapse not communicating, you know, like there was a difference in how he carried himself. And I think it, because he added such like a breadth to it, anybody, like so many people have different interpretations about Lear, you know, and who he is, you know, what his mind is doing, what's true, what's false. And he created a really nice palette, I think, for people to make their own opinion on the matter.
Ed, what is your opinion on the mental state of Lear?
So I think, not a psych guy. I think logically or scientifically that it is probably schizophrenia. There's a lot of, and I wouldn't know what type, or I mean, very severe. He's obviously seeing things that aren't there, or he is disfiguring reality. And how offended he is in his daughter's absence of love, though there is no absence of love, right? I think it's a very subtle sort of distortion of reality. And then artfully, symbolically, I think that's the true madness, is that it's him outliving his wisdom.
I was actually going to say too, going back to piggybacking off of that, Ed, like this character is a typical character for me that is out of place, in a sense of like born in the wrong time, or like an old soul, you know, where it's just like, you may not be wrong, but the circumstances that are placed upon you, or that you find yourself in, they just will not align with you. And it's sad. Like, and there's so many characters that are like that. Like, I'm thinking of like Angie in Top Girls, or, you know, it's just steering away Shakespeare wise, but Shakespeare's every play has like one of these characters, arguably. But, you know, there's that oddball, or there's something that to the social norm is wrong, but it's not. It's just, Ed,
and just, no, I think that's an excellent point, because, and I think if you were in that time when Shakespeare was coming out with plays one after the other, that this would have been a really interesting beginning to see, because all of his dukes love him. All the, pretty much everyone, and Edmund doesn't specifically say that he hates Lear. It's his dad that he hates. Everybody loves Lear, and in so many of Shakespeare's tragedies, the royal
the ruler
are usually trying to fell the king or their son, or right. It's like they're usually against one another, but they're in the beginning they love Lear, and Lear is oh no, I'm talking myself into a circle. What was it that you said again?
No, for sure. I get where you're going.
Nodding to the staging, like hats off to the staging again, in a sense of, I actually got goosebumps in the moments where the very beginning, again, Colm, this is starting his palette off, but he was very switchy in the beginning, like cool as a cucumber, and then like bam, like this happens, or like, whoa, what did you just say? Like, why did you just say that? So it was a beautiful, stark introduction.
Yeah.
And then the staging of it was, I got teary because it's like all the characters are standing very like stoic and just like they don't understand. Like there's no way, you immediately know from the beginning there's no way that they can help him, or they will have no idea what's going on in his head. And already this production painted a really good picture of like, this guy is going on a hell of a trip or a journey, and like no one is gonna, like, people will be by his side and like, you know, similar to the Fool and Gloucester and blah blah blah, but no one will ever actually be able to access what's happening. And so I just remember him being very flippant and like animalistic, and all the other humans are just like standing there watching. Like it was, there was just a total divide of comprehension and just talk about like temporal moods. Like there was a total span of time. You were in two different places at once, essentially.
Lear is definitely seen, I think, seen at his wisest in the beginning, and is wise when he is, you know, in the torrents of madness.
I have to disagree with you that he's wise at the beginning.
Well, he's seen as wise.
Oh, right? He's seen as okay.
Seen as wise. Because I mean, when he starts to lose his mind, people just start like, "What the?"
Well, yeah, like it's the kind of great, you know, tagline of this play that Lear loses his mind but gains his wisdom, or loses his mind and gains his heart. You know, that Gloucester loses his eyes and suddenly he can see which son, the one that betrayed him, which one was loyal. So, you know, there's all these fun, you know, Oedipal reversals in terms of the blindness.
All right. Well, for me, I think for Lear, I don't like that they said like people have like he has either like a stroke or dementia, because I feel like it gives Lear a way out. For me, I see Lear as just a man who is aging. And I mean, like seeing with like my grandfather, who at 93 is still trying to run a company with my mother. Like there's a lot in there where it's just like you see they're going from, say, the sixth stage of man a man to the seventh, where he's going into this childlike, where we see this with the elderly, where they think they can still be in charge and try and run things, and then they get frustrated. Either their families or PSWs, and they'll lash out either physically or verbally. And then the next minute they're remorseful. So people saying he's flipping between madness. I think he's more just aging, and he's becoming this child again, as Shakespeare would describe it. And it's not so much of, oh, well, he had a stroke and that's justifying why he does what he does. It's like, no, he's just what we're seeing now with a lot of elderly, where it's like they're frustrated with their life and their situation, where they're just becoming dependent, and they don't want to become dependent. And it's like, I get it. Like, it sucks sometimes that you have to depend on your children for things. But like, if your daughter says, "I'm sorry, Dad, you can't have 200 people come stay with me for how many months of the year," and he's like, "Well, screw you, I'm going out in the storm." It's like, well, that's Lear's fault. That's not God or Regan's fault. Like, it's their whole thing of like they're trying to be in charge. Like they're trying to move forward with things after he's been like, okay, I'm giving it up, I'm retiring, and it's like, kidding, I'm actually still gonna try and rule the room. Like, oh, no, Dad, sorry, you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So for me, I just go, Lear, like, he's a fascinating character. Where it's like, sure, you can play him with like a stroke. Now, Colm Feore clearly was going more in like dementia route, where like there's the one moment where he's banging his head. At the head smacker. I'm like, okay, clearly you're going more on the like clearly you're going more at the mental health side of things, which is great. But for me, I just watched that and I went, I just see Lear as someone who's just aging and is not aging well, because some people do age gracefully. People age into that retirement.
Most actors who play Lear age gracefully. Lear himself does not.
As someone like to kind of piggyback off that, Mac, too, like that idea, like, yes, literally it can show he's going the mental health route, but also just like physicalizing the frustration that you're explaining that elderly folk go through. As a personal perfect example, my only grandparents left. My grandma, she's like was a clean bill of health her whole life, and she's coming up on 86, and she just got hit with cancer like this past year. And she was someone that, like, she was on the golf course like 2 years ago, right? And so she aged gracefully, and then this hit her, you know, and then now with us being in the middle of a pandemic too, and that's adding a layer of loneliness and difference and stuff like that too. So I think something like again, props to Colm for creating this palette, like that physicalization of frustration, and something that can happen, like my grandmother, where it's such a stark thing that it's like, you had everything and then it's gone, or it's different, or it's changing. And there's really, that frustration has to go somewhere, right? And it's like, his mind is his only friend, but also his enemy too, right? So like quite literally, he's like, help me out here, or like screw you, like
I feel as though Lear was supposed to die before this play started, and that he just continued to live. And just kind of going off of what you were saying, where it's like he's just sort of outgrown his time. That I think, out of necessity, he had to, or he has to, because he had 3 daughters, not a son. And in the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, he's not choosing an heir per se. He's just dividing his children. His property.
He's dividing his property, and it's also on the day of his daughter Cordelia choosing a husband. So he kind of steals the spotlight from her. Once again, that elderly kind of control the room, control the situation. Where it's like.
And that's a really good point they brought up, that he should have maybe died before. And like that first act of the play is something that usually only happens after a death, is dividing a property. But like he even says himself that he does so to avoid strife between the sisters after he's gone. So, or to prevent future strife. And I think that's very interesting, because it's precisely his act of doing this prematurely that creates the strife. Not between the sisters, although that comes later. But him trying to get ahead of the curve is what causes everything that goes wrong in this play.
So continuing on with our exploration of Lear the character, our next kind of question to all of us is Lear a character we should, as an audience, pity? Like, is this someone that we're supposed to be like feeling, like Lear, like poor Lear, this sucks for Lear, or is this something where it's the other way? I mean, do anyone want to kick off, or I can start with my thoughts? Well,
you start.
You start with your thoughts.
You start with your
thoughts.
You
never get to start.
Yeah, you're always so kind to let us go first.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll say no. I mean, I don't pity Lear. Like when he dies, I'm like, okay, yeah, it sucks for him, but like it's his own undoing. As Ryan points out, this all spins out from a trivial problem with Lear, where like it's his choice to go out in the tempest, where they're like, listen, you can stay with me, but you're only going to get 50 people. And he's like, oh no, I'm going to go to the other daughter. And it's like, oh well in that case you're only going to get 25. And for him it's like, you cause your own problems here, Lear, because like right away you know that he's pitted these daughters against each other repeatedly throughout their history, where eventually they've now figured out his game, and they're now forming a united front. Like Gonno and Regan, for like, I can understand why they do it. They do at the beginning, because it's like, if throughout the whole, like, because he calls Cordelia his favorite, and so you got to think like throughout the rest of his time as ruler, he's probably told them that many a time, that Cordelia is my favorite. So then to be like, okay, now tell me how much you love me, and they're going to be like, of course we're going to tell you that, which then leads into their thing of later on, like them kind of winning the day in the beginning, but then it's that problem later on of, what do we do with this man? And do they handle it the best way? No. But at the same time, there's a lot of families that don't handle the elderly the way they should, and we see that a lot of times. Where nowadays, like, like now they're being difficult, so we're going to put them in a home and not go see them. But it's that thing of, Lear kind of does this to himself. And at the end, I'm like, I don't feel, I guess it's sad that he has to carry his daughter, and that's tragic. That, like any parent that has to carry a child, like a dead child, really sad. But like throughout the rest of it, I'm like, Lear, like you didn't have to be out in the storm. You didn't have to go this route.
Well, Mac, if I can jump in on that.
Yeah, no, Ryan, go.
I think it is precisely because this is all so avoidable, and that it's Lear's fault, is why we do, or at least can, pity him. Because, like, tragedy isn't good versus evil. Tragedy is good versus good.
Right. Very
to
true.
Paraphrase Hegel. But, like, it's the idea that, yes, all of this is unavoidable, and it's, his hubris or his, whatever his flaw, and we can debate what his specific flaw is in this case. But the desire to be loved is quite literally what leads to his undoing, his stubbornness. And Yeah, the fact that, like, I wasn't, criticizing that, oh, these problems are so trivial, therefore we can't pity him. I think it's because, so many things could have gone the other way and none of this would have happened is kind of what makes it hit so hard at the end. And I think the death of Cordelia is the biggest exemplar of that, because 10 seconds, if they had, like, gotten Edmund in the gut 10 seconds earlier, they probably could have avoided that whole thing. And there's actually, like, restoration versions of this play that rewrote it, that Cordelia survives and marries Edgar and all as well.
Yes. Yes, that was a popular version that they performed for a long time before they reinstalled the tragic ending.
I have like a split view, or like a split pity on him.
Jill, give us the split view.
Similar to how the brain kind of goes one way or the other. I find that I don't pity him at all when it comes to like Lear as the father and Lear as the ruler. Even Lear as like a comrade. I think he's arrogant and stubborn, and he shares a lot of negative aspects in that way. But Lear as a person, by the end of it, I do feel for him, and that's something that's always really interesting in how I read or see plays too. Is I find that I can dissociate myself from the character and like just think of the character as a human, as opposed to the plot, like what they're serving to the plot. So from like a plot perspective, I guess I don't pity him at all. But from a person perspective, like absolutely I do. And I think it bleeds back into the notion of like this, it's not his fault that he's, past his time or born out of his time, and that's stuff like that is sad to me, or definitely has me rooting for people like that. So exactly, like by the end with him holding Cordelia, or even the moments that he's, I've said it again, is raw and on the ground. Like when he's that's like when he's literally on the ground, that's when for me he's grounded, Any other time that he's standing up, it's like, again, he's floaty, he's he's speaking off his head or whatever, literally. But when he's on the ground, our whole, like, bears the weight of everything down. It's you start kind of squeezing out who the person of Lear actually is. So pity the person, don't pity the plot.
I get what you're saying, exactly. Ed, your final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I like what Ryan said. I do believe that you can pity him, and I think what the production was going for was that they want you to pity him, but I don't believe the intent should be for Lear to be pitied. Like, I think you can pity him if you like, if that's what you see, but I don't think the intent should be for him to be pitied. He is a person that dragged his legacy through the dirt. I think it would have been really interesting if he didn't hold Cordelia on the way in, that symbol of what could have been, his whole legacy in his hands right there. I think it would have been really interesting if instead he dragged her body in.
In the production they did in the early 2000s with, I don't know if it was Christopher Plummer or Peter Hutt. One of them, they actually did have, because the actors couldn't lift Cordelia, they actually did have him drag her on stage. Yes.
I think that would have been, because it just symbolizes that Lear did this onto himself, and if we are to learn anything from Lear and his actions, because I think maybe the one moment where we like it's appropriate to pity him is when he comes to the realization that, what I did was wrong. And just that, but if we're to learn something, it's that our actions have consequences, and that this is the things that unfold, cause and effect of his. It's so hard because he's not even fully mad in the beginning.
Play.
So
he starts out as sane as he can, his level of sane. But just goes down the ladder.
He's not at the
to me, he's mad in the sense that it's different. Like
Yeah.
his madness is like it's difference or like an abnormality.
Yeah.
You know,
I believe in the beginning of the play that it's more so pride than madness that is making him
Absolutely.
reject
that's a better way to describe it. Yeah.
Cordelia. And that's why I think it is totally his choice in that matter, and in that scene specifically, that he rages against Cordelia for what she says in front of all of his court.
Yeah, it's true. Like his pride is wounded in that moment. Absolutely.
And in front of her two suitors, and that's why Burgundy leaves.
Yeah,
you have nothing now. Do you want to marry her? Great, get out.
Right. So speaking of daughters and other characters, the final question of today is, do the villains of this piece have valid arguments or reasons for their actions of the show?
We already kind of touched on this slightly earlier when we were talking about the performances of these
We
roles.
did. We did lightly touch on it.
Can you read that again, Mac, just so I can fully digest?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the final question is, do the villains of the piece have valid arguments or reasons for their actions?
So villains would be Goneril, Regan, and Cornwall, and Edmund. Cornwall's a villain. Let's not cut him out of the loop.
Yeah, it's true. Cornwall's in there.
Especially in this production, they really play up his...
He is in there.
Yeah.
He's all up in there.
Yeah.
I have to agree with Mac when he had spoken about Goneril and how it was like out of desperation. I feel she was the strongest. Like I still not trying to contradict my note earlier where it just kind of switches closer towards the end, but I think for the first half into going into the latter, that she does show more valid reason for her actions as opposed to Edmund or what was the other one?
Cornwall, who was Regan's husband. As opposed to Edmund and Cornwall, I would say Edmund is third out of those three. I think there can be a valid reason. I just don't think in this particular production that was really focused on. I think they just wanted Edmund to be the obvious villain.
I think there's so much like bubbling subtext of tension that every character has in this play because of Lear's uncertainty and he's sort of like the overseer to everyone. That sort of bleeds into all the other characters, I think, because they're frustrated with that, but then also through literal DNA, you see pockets of Lear in all the daughters too.
Yes.
Like his tenderness in Cordelia, the fieriness in Regan, the sort of like
stoic
shit done, in Goneril. So, what was I getting at?
Are they justified in what they do?
Oh, yes. So I feel like, yes, they are, because by sheer fact of Lear just projects this like arrogance or like this aura onto everyone. So, like there's only so much a person can squelch that, when he's always there. Right. And so anytime they flip off, it's just like, they have to release in some shape or form. And others in this production did it quite grotesquely, but and I just think that's like a nod to humans too. I feel like everyone had when they have a temper or a temper tantrum, or it's that release of energy that you need to have. And so I don't think especially like in a play or like a script or even like a story, there's definitely some sort of justification for the villain.
Yeah, perfect, wonderful. Ryan, any last piggybacks onto this topic?
Well, something that I think just pervades all of Shakespeare's works is no one is ever pure evil, or very rarely, like Shakespeare.
Iago.
Well, even Iago, I think you can, he's the closest you get, certainly, but but I think there's always like little embedded justifications, and like we were just on our other Cup of Hemlock series, we were talking about Merchant of Venice just last night as of this recording, and like I think Shylock is the type of character that is supposed to be just, yep, textbook villain, you're not supposed to like him, but then he's given that speech and you completely do understand his justification.
Yeah.
And I think, with the exception of maybe Cornwall, that same logic applies to all the villains in this play.
Yeah.
Also, like, Shakespeare seems very hyper obsessed with legitimacy and bastardy, and like Edmund is just one of the many characters who's like, well, society treats me like a bastard, so therefore I will be a villain, like Richard III says that in his opening monologue of the play quite outrightly. Edmund says it in this play. Don John doesn't have nearly the same kind of speech in Much Ado About Nothing, but basically the same underpinning logic. King John too, we'll talk about in a few weeks, so I won't dig into that one so much, but I think Shakespeare had a soft spot for cripples, bastards, and broken things, so to speak.
Beautiful. Well said.
To quote Tyrion Lannister. But
love it.
I'm just laughing because that's like so perfectly put.
It is. And I think that's the perfect button for this first episode of The Cup. Thanks everybody for tuning in and enjoying this. Yes, raise our glasses.
Let's raise the cup.
yes, raise the cup. Cheers to all. You can find all of our Cup of Hemlocks on all the different social media platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at Cup of Hemlock. Jill, our wonderful Shakespeare virgin / wonderful special guest and friend of the company. Where can people find you and all your amazing work?
You can follow me. Primarily, I do things on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Jillian.Robinson96, which maybe I'll shoot to Mac.
Yeah, we'll tag you.
Post the info.
Yes.
And I love doing discussions like this, you guys. I am a practicing actor right now, but I am a huge academic as well. So anytime we can delve into the dramaturgy and nitty-gritty nerd-esque type of theater, I am there in a jiffy. So
fantastic. Well, Jill, we already can announce that you'll be joining us on our next episode of Coriolanus.
Yes, so excited. And I actually got to see that one at Stratford as well. So I'm excited to revisit it virtually and then unpack all of the wonderfulness that is Andre Sills.
Maybe you can find yourself in the crowd.
Maybe. Who knows?
For sure. I mean, fantastic. Other than that, Ed, is there a place they can find you if they want to continue the conversation with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Edmund_Clark_official. That's my actors page. And there, I mean, I hope to start putting out more monologues and whatnot, but if you ever want to drop me a question or, critique anything that I post, then feel free to, please. All right.
Yeah.
Also, we have for Cup of Hemlock our local artist feature. If you are in the province of Ontario, please submit to it. We are trying to keep the motivations and creativity up during the quarantine. All of this is happening while we are in our individual homes. And I think what's more important than anything, like the Renaissance, how it came after the plague, we need artistry today, and we need it now.
Yes. And if you're a designer, exactly. And if you're a designer, please also reach out to Ed as production manager for Cup of Hemlock. We'll be happy to talk with you and get you on our list of designers and creators as well. So please shoot him a line. And Ryan, you are a man going for his PhD right now. So where can they find you and talk to you all about academic and fun theatrical?
I am pretty social media illiterate, so I have.
Says the literary manager.
I have Facebook. If I don't know you, please don't add me as a friend. I do have a Twitter. Like, I set up the account once and have literally not logged on it since. So you can follow that if you want, I guess. I have another theater company called Sad Ibsen Theater. Socials exist, but have been pretty inactive for a while. So you can follow those, and maybe at some point there will be news of a new production. But in the meantime, I'd much prefer you send that love to Cup of Hemlock.
Send it to our Cup of Hemlock theater, or just comment below, and we'll try to answer whatever questions you have.
Yeah. This will be up on our YouTube page. There'll be lots more good stuff coming on this page going forward. You can find me at all social media platforms at Mackenzie Horner. You can follow me on my podcast called Before the Downbeat, which is a musical-based podcast where on a weekly basis, my co-host Autumn Smith and I dive into a musical at the time of this recording, our season 2 premiere is coming with Fiddler on the Roof. So, yahoo! Fun times. There. We'll be back next with our a deep dive into the Cup review of Coriolanus, directed by Robert Lepage from the Stratford Festival. So stay tuned for that, everybody. We'll see you soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Cheers,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Be
Bye.
safe.
Cheers.
Bye.